Good morning to all. It gives me immense pride and pleasure to introduce a very esteemed and highly accomplished biostatistician of our country, Honorable Dr. Srinivas Vishnu Bhatla, a former professor of biostatistics from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Dr. Srinivas has over 40 years of experience to his credit. He has served in various institutes like Indian Council of Medical Research Chennai, Cancer Institute Chennai, ICMR HRs New Delhi, and the AIMS New Delhi. Presently, Dr. Srinivas is a fellow of the Royal Statistical Society UK, a Commonwealth Academic Fellow at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine UK, and a WHO Fellow at the Khon Kaen University, Thailand. He has more than 600 articles to his credit in various disciplines of clinical medicine. He has also authored two books, including one on biostatistics. His illustrious career in statistics has been recognized as several awards to his credit. To mention a few, like Excellence Award from Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation, USA, Chief of the Naval Staff Award for the Best Publication, Srimati Suraj Kali Jain Award for the Indian Society for Medical Statistics. Dr. Srinivas is a biostatistics reviewer for several journals of high repute like Journal of Clinical Oncology, Journal of Pediatrics, Indian Journal of Medical Research, Indian Journal of Dermatology, and Indian Pediatrics. He is also a member of the editorial board of Nepalese Journal of Statistics. He is an advisor of biostatistics for the Journal of Neonatology, India, and a statistical consultant to the Journal of Indian Association of Child and Adult Mental Health. There is still a lot more to Dr. Vishnu Bhatla works and researches, and the list is very extended. We are very fortunate to have him with us for this workshop and look forward to his talk. I'm sure our students are going to benefit immensely from his subject expertise today. I welcome you once again, Dr. Srinivas, to this workshop today and request you to present your talk. Thank you all.
Hi. I am Dr. Srinivas, a retired professor of biostatistics from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. I'm going to talk to you on two issues: what is a sample and what are the sampling methods. And the other component that I'm going to talk is what is how to calculate a required sample size for a study. So I will deal with this sample and sampling methods. Then as a separate topic we will deal with the sample size calculation. So when to start with, what is sampling? Sampling may be a difficult word for some of you, but the concept is definitely all of us will be knowingly or unknowingly we have been part of in the real life. The sampling is part of our life. It is neither new nor unfamiliar in our everyday life. When I say this, I will give you a few examples. For example, a cook examines a few grains of rice, whether the rice is boiled properly or the rice is cooked properly or not. They're not going to, a mother doesn't need to examine the every grain of the rice to examine whether it is cooked properly or not. Or the other example you can easily think of is when one goes to a market to buy, let's say, some cereals or rice or wheat. Do you really examine the entire gunny bag full of wheat to decide whether to buy from that or not? Obviously not. You take a handful, just see what is the texture, what is the size of the grain, what is the color, and some any dhul, mitti type things, and then decide whether to buy from that bag or go to another shop or some other variety type of things. So in medicine, we all know that blood sampling is done, urine sample is done to examine for an infection or some other parameter. We don't really need to draw the total blood or urine or sputum or bone marrow. So we only take the very small 5 ml, 3 ml and then decide the status for the whole blood in the body. So the concept of sampling is, whether you understand or not, it is neither new nor unfamiliar in our everyday. So the aim of this sampling is to choose a relatively small part or sample that can be adequately representing the entire spectrum of the total target subjects, so that we are able to extrapolate whatever you observe the results in the small sample to the substantially larger population. Now, after your sample subjects are identified, you obtain individual information on each of the individuals in your sample in an item-wise structured manner, and this information is what is called the data, and there are various methods to collect data. So these methods, what we call the sampling schemes or sampling methods, we are going to talk about in the next few minutes. What are the advantages of sampling? There are definitely certain advantages which we will discuss now. And as I said, complete enumeration is not feasible. If you think of blood collection for an infection or urine collection to examine for a patient whether there is what is the sugar level type of things, you cannot obviously draw the total blood or total urine, and also it is not required. That's another part. So to take the same concept further, there are certain items which are, the moment you test, they are no longer useful. They are no longer they are used up, or they are destructible. It could be a disposable syringe, or it could be a cardiac stent, or it could be an implant, or to, in a lighter sense, it could be the, let's say, the firecrackers for a Deepavali function. So if you test all the crackers that are produced before the Diwali, whether they are working or not, the moment you test, then for the real Diwali, you should have some to be left to celebrate the festival. So that's what I mean. Its complete enumeration or studying the total is not feasible for either ethical considerations for a human body or in any other health conditions, or in, as I said, in other situations like you want to test the disposable syringes, stents, or crackers, Diwali crackers type things. Then the sampling obviously reduces the cost and enhances the feasibility of the study, because you don't require longer time type of things. The cost will be very much lower, and it gives you speedier results. And because you are focusing only on fewer subjects, not the total, you can as well spend more time with more caution, with more trained people, and better methods, with accurate methods, which are otherwise not possible when you want to examine the total population. So these are the advantages of sampling. Obviously, there are a few disadvantages too. Sampling is only a fraction of the total, obviously, and for whatever reasons, it may not be representative of the population or the total. So this is possible, very much possible, depending on the type of variable or the phenomena that you are studying, the time and the sample size type of things, which we will briefly discuss as we get along further in this. So another important limitation is sampling may not provide precise information on subsets or smaller segments of the total. containing the individuals. Let me give you an example for this. Suppose there are 5,000 undergraduate students in Delhi University, and I want to see, I want to understand what is the average height of the students of undergraduate students of Delhi University. So I don't have the time of or resources to enumerate each of these 5,000 students. So what do? I take a sample of 100 students and then take the height of each individual in my sample, and then come to a conclusion that the average height is 162 centimeters. So my estimate for the total, which is not known most often, is 162 centimeters average height of a student, undergraduate student in Delhi University. Fine. But if I want to ask the question that what is the height of the, let's say, male students versus female students, the sample size that I studied, 100, may not be giving me a reasonably valid estimate. That's what we mean. Sampling may not provide precise information on subsets or small segments of the total containing few individuals. Or to put it another way, there are only, let's say, very few students are there from in Delhi University, let's say from a remote place like, say, Andamans and Nicobar Islands, let's say. So you want to ask a question that what is the average height of a undergraduate Delhi University student who belongs to an area called Andamans and Nicobar Islands. Then my sampling may not be helpful. This is what you must understand. So this is sampling disadvantage. And another limitation, if you want to call, or it is the strength if you want to look in another way, there is no one method of sampling that is universally acceptable. Depending on the situation, depending on the type of characteristics, depending on the resources at your disposal, you have to choose what suits you the best. So these are the sampling. Then before we get into the different methods of sampling, I need to tell you the terminology about sampling. First, the population. When I say population, it is, please don't get confused with the demographic term population of India, population of Delhi, type of things. No, the population in sampling terminology refers to the target group of any investigation about whom we wish to know, or what we call the universe. For us, it is the universe. Let me give you an example. Suppose you want to see what proportion of primary school children in Delhi have their first molar tooth erupted. The question is very simple. What proportion of primary school children in Delhi have the first molar tooth erupted? So what is my target population? All primary school children in Delhi. So that's my population. So this is what we mean, that don't get confused with the demographic term of a population. So the target group of any investigation is your population. And what determines this? Obviously the type of objective, the type of study, what you have in mind will determine who is your population. And naturally the cost, logistic considerations don't allow you to study of all subjects in your population. So this is one real constraint, costs and logistic considerations. And even if you have the resources, costs and all, not a problem. Even if all existing members are studied, you have enough time and you have enough resources to study everybody in the community of your target population. There is no guarantee that the results would apply for future cases, or in the future also the same result holds. There is no guarantee. So you need to keep this also in mind. And when you come to population, because I pardon me for referring to health and medical related examples, because I've been associated with this type of work for so many years. So obviously such examples come to my mind. The concept of population in medicine is more hypothetical, because what is the population attending the clinics at All India Institute of Medical Sciences? If you ask, there is no definition, because a person from Bihar can come or Northeast can come, and as well as a person nearby Gurgaon or next door Green Park can come. So I don't have a well-defined population in a hospital's medical medicine setting. So the concept of population in medicine is more hypothetical. That's what I mean. Yeah. Now another term we use is what is called sampling unit, and it is nothing but the unit of inquiry or the subject on which the information is being obtained. So if you go back to the school children survey on first molar eruption, your sampling unit is the child, because every child you want to examine and see the first molar is erupted or not. So every sampling unit is every child in your sample is your sampling. Then the third term what we use is frame. What is our sampling frame? Nothing but list of all sampling units in the target or in the population. So when you prepare the frame, you need to be careful that all units must be mutually exclusive. When you talk of the example situation, the all children, primary school going children in the city of Delhi is your frame, but no child should be included in more than one school. Okay, so that is what when we say mutually exclusive, and the list must be exhaustive. No child, no primary school going child should be left from this list. He or she should be part of the list. It should be mutually exclusive, and it must be exhaustive list. Then we talk about this is an important concept which is very useful to understand the benefit of different sampling schemes. So I thought it will be useful. I know it is a bit slightly not so easy to understand, but at the same time I should say you are all familiar with the concept called standard deviation from your plus 2 mathematics. So what is standard deviation? It gives the average distance of every subject, every individual or every observation from the mean, the average distance of every individual in the sample from the central value of mean. So that the more the distance, the more the spread or the more the fluctuations. The same concept is extended to standard deviation, is extended to standard error. In fact, standard error is also a standard deviation. The method of calculation, everything is same. Absolutely, both mean same. Standard deviation refers to a particular sample. Standard error is the standard deviation of the estimates you make from samples. Make that distinction clear. So SE quantifies the variation expected from sample to sample. When I say sample to sample, let me come back to your example of the average height of an undergraduate student in Delhi University. Suppose there are 5,000 students, but I take a sample of 500 and I got an estimate of 162 centimeters. Let my friend take from another friend take another sample of 100. Are you sure he or she will get exactly 162? Maybe, may not be, and most often it may not be, because the sample, there is a variation from sample to sample. That's what he might get 160 or he might get 165. it or very rarely 162. And let's take another individual, a third individual takes another sample of 100, the result could be 158 or 167. So what is the fluctuation from sample to sample? Mind you, this very important word, it is from sample to sample. The total population value is fixed because all are adults. The growth is already, whatever the potential is there, they have reached that growth. This further growth is very non-existent, let's say. Then there is no chance, the average value in the average height of an undergraduate student this year is fixed. So there is no variation in the population parameter. Where is variation? From sample estimate to sample estimate. If you repeat the study with the same sample size, with the same measuring laboratory techniques from the same population, one sample will give one result, another sample will give another result. So the variation that can be quantified or expected from sample to sample is what is called standard error. It is the standard deviation in the sample estimates, mind you. So the more the standard error, just like standard deviation, the more the fluctuations in the result from sample to sample. To come back to our example, I got 162, another, my friend might get 182, another might get 140. So that means the more the standard error, the more the fluctuations from sample to sample. And why these fluctuations? It could be the inherent phenomena, it could be the sample size, and so on and so forth, which we will be discussed in further topics of statistical topics. The smaller the standard error, the less the fluctuations, and more the consistent the estimate from sample to sample. I got 162, another person got 161, maybe another got 164. So they are very closely packed sample to sample. So the fluctuations are very minimal. And so my estimate is more consistent. So now the square of the standard error is called variance, and the inverse 1 upon variance is what is called precision. Okay, why I am talking about this? Because if you want to compare which sampling scheme is better, which gives more precision is definitely better. So for that sake, I am trying to introduce the concept of standard error, the concept of variance, and the precision. So SE depends on, as I already said, it is on the inherent variability in the characteristic. Some characteristics are very widely variant. For example, the blood pressure from individual to individual will vary very highly varying. Even within an individual, morning to evening, or if you climb one staircase, it will go up like that. So some phenomena are very inherently very variable. Certain phenomena are less variable. So SE depends on the inherent variability in the characteristics and also in the sample size. The standard error will be more with smaller sample size. It will be small with higher sample size. So, okay, now after understanding what is standard error, what is precision, now let us say some other terms called sample size and sample fraction. So, the number of subjects in the sample is called sample size, and we denote it usually by small n. And the number of subjects in the total population is denoted by capital N, and the quantity small n upon capital N is called the sampling fraction. If capital N is say 5000 and small n is say 100, so your sampling fraction is 100 by 5000 or 1 by 50, or how much it is? About 2%. So 2% is the sampling fraction. So now come to the sampling now. Sampling can be broadly two types, a random sampling or a purposive sampling. And when we talk about this, some people have a tendency, purposive sampling, dismiss it off as totally biased. Though it is largely correct, but both have in research both have their place of importance. For example, in drug discovery, the first stage or the first phase is what is called a phase 1 trial, in which our aim is to see how tolerable is this drug in a healthy individual, how much is the tolerable dose, and what are the side effects associated with a particular new drug which is being developed. And in such study, phase 1 trial, it is always done on volunteers. A few volunteers are invited and they are paid for a certain their transport and wages loss type things, and then they are closely examined. But essentially the sample that is selected is voluntary. And who volunteers for such type studies? Obviously healthy, who feels healthy, who is not having any comorbidities type things, and who is confident. So usually they are young and very healthy, apparently very healthy individuals. So that sample may not be representative of the total population. So that is what we mean the purposive sampling has a disadvantage. So coming back to the phase 1 trial is always on a purposive sample, and such studies help to identify what is the tolerable dose and what are the side effects, etc. So the purpose of this voluntary based study ends there. That's it. So it is the very beginning for drug development studies. So it starts with volunteers, which is a purposive sample. So purposive samples are, as I already told you, they are seldom similar to the general population. They are seldom. So that is where the lurking fear or doubt on the findings, as they lack generalizability. Then another method or another sampling scheme is what is called as quota sampling. This is usually done in consumer surveys. Some of you must be knowing, who are involved in summer vacations, some companies employ for consumer survey, college students are generally employed. In my own experience, if I have to tell, you can be having Saturday, Sunday, you have good lunch and afternoon siesta, enjoying a siesta, good sleep, and somebody rings the bell, you open the door and you see the neighbor's daughter coming and, uncle, we am doing a survey, so I have been assigned which toothpaste you are using, which shampoo you are using, type of questions, consumer surveys. So in these surveys, what they do is they employ a set of field workers or surveyors, and each is assigned, your quota is 20, your quota is 10, like that. So, and these people they're not bothered about how this 10 should be, 20 should be, and it is left to you totally. So naturally your neighbor's daughter will come to you, or known families like us. So they will not go to another colony or unknown families. So the familiarity, so whomever the surveyor knows may not be representative of the population at large. So that is what we say. This quota sampling is also a non-random sampling, and it can introduce bias because the surveyor choosing on according to their convenience, according to their feasibility. So, but the point is, the quota sampling is also a non-random sampling procedure. Another technique again that comes under non-random sampling is what is called snowballing technique. So what we do in this, you begin by identifying a subject which meets your inclusion exclusion criteria. You elicit the required information, and then this first subject is asked to suggest or recommend others meeting the same similar inclusion criteria. So that's how you elicit in possible persons who can be included in your survey. You elicit information from the first contact, and then from this you build the second person. You elicit, depending on the inclusion exclusion criteria, you elicit required information, and again ask, do you know anybody in your neighborhood, in your college, in your office, who is likely to have this type criteria, exposure type things, and you continue till a predetermined number of subjects are included in the sample. Why it is called snowballing? You must be knowing a small snowball, when it starts rolling from the cliffs, mountain cliffs, as it rolls down, it gathers mass. So is the case here. You begin with identifying one subject, ask for any likely, in his own circles, any person will with similar habits, attitudes, or exposures, and then inquire from that person further. Like that you go on building the chain. So this is what is called a snowballing technique of sampling, and this is again a non-random procedure, and it is suitable where persons meeting inclusion criteria are difficult to locate. This is more so if you are trying to elicit, do a survey on, let's say, habits associated with, let's say, social stigma. Let's say, what is the proportion of drug users in a university students? If you ask, if you advertise, nobody will come and tell that yes, I take drugs. So what you do is you try to catch one person and then elicit information, and then ask that person in your friend circle, do you think similar habit, similar exposure, or who is likely to be a person of this habit, can you suggest? So if he or she suggests, then you approach that person and elicit information. Again ask that question to the second person. He suggests some more person. Like that you build the chain. So it is what is. So till you complete your predetermined number of subjects are included in your sample. So stigmatic conditions, if you want to survey, even otherwise, in fact, maternal mortality in India, this is the technique most often used. You ask a mother, you ask a family where a mother due to maternal reasons died. Then you ask, do you know any similar family such a thing could have occurred? Say yes, I don't know Pakka, but 4-5 houses down the line in the same road, there was a mother who was expecting baby last week or now recently. So you go and inquire there, and like that you go on build. So the maternal mortality, the snowballing technique is the one in rural areas being employed to assess the maternal mortality. The main point here is this snowballing technique is also a non-random sampling, and it can lead to biased results. That's another thing, because the sampling is you are deciding who should be included and who should not be included. So the concept now, what is so far we have seen purposive sampling, now random sampling. What are the benefits of random sampling? The random samples, they guard against any personal preferences in the selection of your sample subjects. There is no personal preference. I don't go by what I like, I know, or I don't know type things have no role. It provides, most important, statistical analysis, the methods that have been devised, whether you call it t-test, chi-square type things, they are strictly speaking applicable only for random samples. If it is a purposive sample, even statistical methods, strictly they are not applicable, because the statistical theory assumes random sampling. So that is another benefit of random samples. And systematic selection. Sometimes there are studies which are published even in reputed journals some 10-15 years back. We have assigned Monday, patients admitted on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays are put on treatment A, and patients admitted on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturdays are given on treatment B. So, or odd even dates, patients admitted on 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, like that, odd dates are given treatment A, even dates 2, 4, 6, like that on another treatment. These are what we call systematic selection, but they are not random, because I know the I know if it is, for example, treatment B is being in the hospital, I know that treatment B is better. I will tell my own relative or a neighbor wants to come to the hospital for the similar condition, treatment for the similar condition that being studied. I will say, you don't come on Mondays and Wednesdays, please come on Thursday or Saturday. Because I know the patients get better treatment, or which is believed to be better treatment on those days. So there is no randomness, because you know you can manipulate, and you know who is coming, who will get what on what day prior to the patient's arrival or subject's arrival. So this is systematic selection is also not random selection. So random, and another the most important point, random selection does not mean selecting in a haphazard manner. Just selecting as you like is not random. Okay, what is important? Random selection is reproducible. I will show you how it is reproducible. So in the next few slides you will realize. So the random sample definitely has advantages, because you have your personal preferences have no role. They provide a basis for standard application of statistical standard methods, and random selection does not mean selecting haphazard manner, and random selection is reproducible. And the truth population value lies within a specified limit with some degree of confidence. So now let me give you an example of the sampling, and two schemes in detail we will discuss through a numerical example, which will make you help you to understand clearly what is the sampling error type things. Suppose my population consists 6 individuals, 6 members labeled as A, B, C, D, E, F. 6 individuals labeled as A, B, C, D, E and F. And all these 6 members have values of a parameter. It could be height, it could be weight, whatever you want to call it. They have values, some parameter, A 1, B has 2, C has 4, D 6, E 7 and F 16. So what is the population total? If you say 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 7 plus 16 is 36. This is the truth on one side. There are 36. The total parameter value of the population is 36. Now you want to do a sampling, random sampling. Let us say I want to choose 3 out of these 6 members. So what do? The method is very simple. Write the letters A to F on 6 slips, identical size, shape and color, whatever you want to say. And then these 6 slips you put it in a basket, shuffle them, mix them, and pick up 3 slips and study the individuals indicated on each of the 3 slips that you picked up. So in sample survey methodology, such a scheme is called simple random sampling, or SRS. Okay, so this method. each unit of the population in the simple random sampling, what you did implies is, because you have put 6 chits in the basket, so for each one representing each member of the population, all are being considered for to have a chance for your to be included in your sample, and each unit has the same chance because every individual only one chit you have put. If you have put A 2 chits, A has double the chance because you are putting 2 chits for it. So here each individual in the population has the same chance of being included, and this principle is the hallmark of simple random sampling, and it is equivalent to say that all possible samples of a particular size, here it is sample size 3, have equal chance of being selected. Okay, each individual has equal chance. It is equivalent to say all possible samples of particular size have equal chance of being selected. I'll explain you the second way here. So you have 6 individuals, A, B, C, D, E, F. You want to select 3 out of them. So how many ways are, forget about this. Let us see. Let's see who can be the 3 individuals. It can be A, B, C. Keep A, B constant. A, B, C, A, B, D, A, B, E, A, B, F. Now keep AC constant. It cannot be ACB. ACB is same as ABC. So we don't consider ACD, ACE, ACF. Now keep AD fixed, ADE, ADF. Again you cannot take ADB or ADC because ADC is same as ACD. So like that BCD, BCE. So you have 20 possible ways of selecting 3 individuals out of 6. So mathematically, if you recall your permutations, combinations, +2 and +1 level mathematics, so 6C3 or 6 into 5 into 4 upon 3 into 2, that is 20 ways you can choose 3 individuals out of 6. So now simple random sampling, each individual has equal chance, or each of these 20 possible samples have equal chance. That's what we said earlier. Okay, so once if you understand the scheme, how to do, a more scientific way is to use random numbers. For example, if your population is 100 and you want to select 10 individuals out of 100, so what you can do, the simple option as we discussed earlier, you can have 100 chits, put them in a basket and mix them well and pick 10 subjects, and the individual who indicated on each chit, such individual is picked up in your sample. Another way, or a more scientific way, easier way, is pick 10 consecutive 2-digit random numbers, because maximum is 100. So if you consider 0, it can be 0 to 99 or 2 digits. So from table, the random number table, you pick up 10 consecutive 2-digit random numbers, and if there are any repetitions, ignore and pick up the next random number, and subjects with such serial number are to be selected. And what are these random numbers? These are statistically generated numbers through using some statistical distributions, and they are purely random. You can what I would say, they are readily available, and any standard textbook, statistical books will have these numbers. These days computers are also generating, but they are not, they require a seed. To start with, you give a seed, then it generates. But so long as the seed is same, it will be repeating the same random number. So they are pseudo random numbers, because you have to give the seed, and the same seed whenever you give, you will get the same random numbers. So they are not strictly random, but for practical purposes, that is also being considered these days as random numbers. But I will show you the application or usage of the statistical random number. So this is a standard from one book I picked up. You can see each column has 5 digits. So like that I have about 10 columns, I think. Yes, 10 columns. And each row is numbered. So if you 0, 1, 2. So this is 10,000 random number, randomly assorted digits. They don't call it numbers, you see. It's not actually number. It looks like is 70,639, this number if you take first row, fourth column. But it is not a number, it is 5 digits. So now what we do, suppose you want to pick up, as we discussed, 10 random numbers. You want from 100, 0 to 1, 0 to 99 or 1 to 100. Let's take 0 to 100. You make a random beginning. Close your eyes and put your pencil somewhere. So let's say my starting point is the 7th row, 4th column, second digit. So it is 3. So now I want 2 digits. So my first random number is 30. Second random number is 91. Third random number is also 91, but since 91 has already come, I ignore. Then next I will pick up 53. Next random number 03, that is 3, 64, 66, like that I continue till the required number is want. So instead of going randomly, random start say, instead of going right, I can as well go down. For example, it could be 35, it could be next 14 and so on and so forth. Or I can go left, it could be 38, 60, 80, 15, 10, 0, 38, like that. Or I can go up, it could be 35, 27, 82, 90, like that. And or even I can go diagonal. But before you start, you need to decide a priori. In the beginning itself, you should specify. I will pick up a random location. From then I will go up, straight up, and then take the 2-digit numbers. Or I will go left, horizontal, I will go left and then take this thing. And if you reach the end, then if you reach the end of the a particular row, then also you should say you will go up or down and then again continue down or right. These are pre-documented so that when you remember I said random sampling is reproducible. So once if you document, one can easily verify how randomly you have selected your sample. Then this is the scheme of what is called simple random sampling. The main advantage of simple random sampling is it's very easy to understand and you can quickly implement it. Selection is left to the luck of the draw. One problem is we have not used the prior knowledge that we have. Individual 1 has a value of 1, individual B has a value of 2, individual C has a value of 4, I think, and individual F has a value of 16. It is available to us, I have not utilized it, we have not utilized it in the selection of the sample. Okay, so that is how it is useful. We will see later. Selected units can be physically far apart. Suppose you are choosing 3 individuals, let's say A, D, F. A stays in close to Delhi University, but C stays in, let's say, Dwarka, and F stays, let's say, in Rohini. And so they are physically far apart. Though you are random, definitely, no doubt, but they are physically far apart, thereby increasing the logistic difficulties and resource requirement and etc. So this procedure often a satisfactory method if the population is not highly variable. If you are studying a phenomena which is likely to vary widely, then this technique may not be very useful or helpful. When I say helpful and useful, you remember we were talking in terms of precision. Okay, precision. So it may not lead to very satisfactory estimates, or the estimates may be very imprecise. That's what we mean. So another requirement for this sampling scheme is availability of the frame. It is a prerequisite. I should know what is the total, and preferably their list in a geographic sequence or type of things. So this is essential for simple random sampling. It used to be a very difficult thing, but nowadays you have, especially for adult based studies, 18 plus, you have the water lists are readily available, which are updated periodically. I think every year they are updated, and you choose a polling booth, and with that booth, one booth caters to, I think in urban areas, about 2000 voters. So you can always choose how many booths you want and go to the election commission, give a small application, pay perhaps 200 rupees or so. They will give a CD which will give you the complete sampling frame is readily available. So this is no longer a very constraint as far as simple. So coming back, whether available or not, it may not be always feasible, especially in hospital based studies of frame, because the population itself is not well defined. One patient coming from Assam, another coming from nearby Gurgaon, another patient is close next door, Green Park of the All India Institute. So, what is the population? There is no well defined geographic region to say this is the population that is being catered by the All India Institute. It is very difficult to say. So, naturally, frame is not possible to be defined. So via media, what we do, we take consecutive patients attending a clinic, meeting certain inclusion exclusion criteria during a certain period as the random sample of the population of all cases attending that particular clinic. And if you have the luxury of having enough number of patients each day or each time, you can employ some sampling scheme, selection scheme. Okay, so the frame is really important if you are doing a field survey. But if it is not available, what do? People used to do, you can make efforts. People used to make efforts to enumerate the target itself, which itself is a big task taking 1 year, 2 years. Alternatively, you can use what is called area sampling, which is more common in agricultural surveys. So, area sampling, choose a part of the total area by random procedure. You divide the total area into certain regular shapes of particular number, and then you number these small parts and randomly pick up, as simple random sampling procedure we have seen in our example. Pick as many units as many you require, and this is what is we refer to as area sampling, and as I said, it is the common practice in agriculture. Okay, so coming back to the simple random sampling, we will see how precise is your estimate if you use a simple random sampling, and we'll work out through a numerical example. And I also told you prior knowledge about the population is not used in our technique, what is called simple random sampling. Why we are saying this? Perhaps usage of such knowledge could improve the precision of our estimate. Let's see how. Recall the example of 6 subjects A, B, C, D, E, F with respective values 1, 2, 4, 6, 7 and 16. The true total population is 36. So far we have already seen this. Now if the selected sample is A, B, C, the sample total is 1 plus 2 plus 4, that is 7. But this 7 represents how many? 3 individuals of the total 6. So for 3 individuals total is 7, our sampling fraction is half, so 50%. So if 7 represents 50%, what will be 100%? 7 into 2 or 14 is the estimate. The truth is 36. Your estimate by simple random sampling, if your sample is A, B, C, you estimated it as 14. So there is an error of 22, 14 versus 36, a huge error. So suppose you instead of ABC, if I had chosen ABD, the sample size would have, the sample total would have been 18, and error is 18 minus 36 is a minus 18, and like that some errors are positive, some errors are negative, but the beauty is the sum of these errors is always 0. So taking errors directly as it is doesn't help us, because the sum is always 0. So what we do to overcome this problem, you square the error. So 22 square is 484, 18 square 324. If you take ABF, sample total is 38. So you have overestimated by 2. So 38 minus 36 plus 2, error is plus 4. Like that, we said there are 20 ways of choosing a sample of 3 from 6 individuals. So you have all the 20 samples, different types of samples, errors and error squares. If you take error sum is 0, but error square is 3504. So the mean square error, total square error is 3504, but the mean, because it is based on 20 types of sample, so mean square error is 3504 divided by 20, which is 175.2. This is the mean square error, and the standard error is nothing but the square root of this, which is 13.2. Now what is the meaning of this 13.2? It means on the average, any sample estimate using simple random sampling of a 50% fraction or 3 individuals out of 6 by simple random sampling will lead to an average sampling error of 13.2 units from 36, the truth 36, or 13.2 is about 37% of 36. So many units away from the true population value. Now, such a large error, if it is okay to you, fine. Usually, such a large error or standard error is not desirable. So, what do? Either I increase the sample size, one option, or use another sampling scheme. So sample size, if I increase, again naturally the time and constraints of budget, all those things will come in. Or if I use another sampling scheme, I need not enhance my requirements of money or time, but maybe other scheme may be helpful. Let us see that. You understand what we are saying so far, how the concept of standard error is useful? Now, again, SRS does not consider the prior knowledge. We have stated it more than once. So our population has 6 members, 1 member F with a high value of 16, rest are all with small values. So this fact, though it is available to us, but we have not utilized it in our sample selection. Let's say these A, B, C, D, E are small states like maybe Punjab and Haryana, Kerala type, and F is a large state, let's say UP. So naturally the bigger state should have a higher probability or higher weight should be given in the selection. You have not considered, you have given equal probability to all. So that is what when we say SRS ignores this fact. Suppose this unit with a value of 16 is large like UP, you can't ignore this in the sampling because this is a large one. So if you ignore that, naturally your sample result is likely to be dependent on only units which have a smaller value. So what we do, you can make the population into 2 groups. One group having large units like UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh perhaps, and another strata with another group with smaller states, with like Kerala, perhaps Haryana and type things, states. So here why you here being 16 is large only one unit and rest 5 are below 16. So you make a scheme. Now my sample size is 3. What I do, I keep one from the large group and any two from the smaller group. I mean group with smaller values. But total is again 3 units only. So this type of scheme is what is called stratified, because you made the total population into two strata, units with large values or high values, units with smaller values. So you made two strata, and within the strata you okay. Now if you keep this scheme, what are the possible samples? Keep F is common, so F is everywhere because there is only one group, one unit in this lab strata, and that has to be included, and rest any two. So AB, F, ACF, ADF, AEF, B के साथ BC, BD, BE, then C के साथ CD, CE, D के साथ only DEF. There are only 10 possible ways of choosing 3 individuals out of 6 with a stratified sampling. Now, in this, what is the total stratum? First strata is 16 anyway fixed. So let's say second strata A and B. So they have a value of 1 plus 2 is 3. And this 3 is representing how many individuals? 2 individuals out of 5. So if 2 individuals have a total of 3, 5 will have, you have to multiply the fraction. So 2.5 is the sampling fraction. So it's 2.5 times is 3 will represent for the total for the 5 individuals. Plus the F value is 16. So 16 plus 2.5, 2 times T2. So that is 23.5 against the total 36, and error is minus 12.5, error square 156.25. Like that you work out. Again you see the errors are, some are positive, some are negative, and the total is 0. See the situation here. If you are lucky, if you have your sample has been AEF, sample estimate is 36, truth is also 36, you have absolutely no error. Similarly, if you have BDF, also no error. But there is no way of knowing that my sample how much close to the truth, as I said, or it exactly represents the truth. There is no guarantee, but it can be possible randomly. We don't know, depending on the type of sample. But what is our importance here, what is our focus here is, you have 10 types of samples under this scheme. What is the total error square? It is 487.5, the mean square error. So 487.5 by 10, which is 48.75. What is the standard error? It is 6.98. So on the average, any sample estimate under this scheme is roughly 7 units away from the true value of 36 in the community. That is, compare this as against 37% in SRS. Now it is 19%. Earlier it was 37%. So by choosing a different way of your sample, you have reduced the standard error or the fluctuation in sampling, sample estimates, or you increased the precision. So there is substantial reduction in the error. So utilizing prior information has improved the precision. So this plan is called stratified sampling with unequal sampling fractions, because from one strata you have taken, there is only one, you have taken one, so it is 100%. From another strata you have, there are 5 individuals, but you have chosen 2. So that is only 2 out of 5, 40% here and 100% there. So the sampling fractions are unequal between the strata. So, but the important point to note here is, from simple random sampling, by stratifying, you have increased the precision or reduced the standard error. So another, to talk further on stratified sampling, it is a very important concept because especially in medicine, you have different groups on different characteristics. For example, breast cancer, if you take a breast cancer in a postmenopausal woman behaves in a particular way, and treatment response will be different compared to a premenopausal breast cancer. If you talk of hepatitis, it could be viral, it could be alcoholic, it could be autoimmune, it could be drug induced, and even if you say even in viral hepatitis, it could be hepatitis A, it could be hepatitis B, it could be hepatitis C. So, and each has its own profile and response characteristics and type of things. Similarly, HIV patients on stage, and so stratification is very relevant in many practical circumstances, especially in medical research. Okay, so another sampling scheme is what is called systematic sampling. People often mistakenly use the word systemic sampling. It is not systemic, it is systematic. So, in this scheme, only the first one is selected randomly and the remaining in a systematic fashion. Let the population size be capital N and the sample size be small n. The sampling interval becomes capital N by small n, that is interval I. So what you do, a unit number R is selected randomly from the first I units and then subsequently every ith unit. If it is R beginning, R plus I, R plus 2I and so on. So the first one only is selected randomly, rest is selected systematically. Suppose you have 200 individuals and you want to choose 20 out of this 200. So it forms about 10%. So interval is 200 by 20, which is sampling interval 10. So select a unit from the first 10 randomly. Let us say it is the fifth unit. So your sampled individuals, the number of the individuals selected is fifth one, then 5 plus 10, 15th one, 25th one, 35th one, and so on and so forth till you reach your the end. Sometimes what happens, this method might lead to giving a smaller probability for the individuals towards the end. So they don't get a chance to be selected. So slightly change this, what we call circular systematic. There is no starting point. I can choose anyone randomly within the first 200. Earlier, because sample interval is 10, so randomly anyone from 1 to 10 first starting point and then systematically. Here what you do, you select anyone out of the 200 first and then go on adding your sample. Suppose you want to choose 30 out of 200, is the interval is 6.66 or round it off 7. So you choose randomly from the anyone 1 to 200, then every seventh from that. So in this process what happens, suppose your first one is 105, fifth one, so you go on 105th, 112th, 119th and so on, but you reach what happens 189, 196, still you are falling short of 30, the 30 individuals are required. So what do you do, 196 plus 7, so it is 203, 200 minus karke, then it is third individual, then 10th individual and 17th individual, like that. So till you get your 30 required one. So this is what is called circular systematic sampling. So it can be easily implemented in a clinical setting. If there are far many cases available, you can adopt some systematic strategy of selection. If there are fewer individuals, this doesn't. So this is very easy to draw because you have to choose only one random number to begin with, and distributes advantage is it distributes the selected sample evenly across the entire population. So that is a plus point, but at the same time one has to be careful. It can lead to bias because the sampling interval, what we said, every 10th, every 15th, if you say, it can coincide with an underground phenomena which can be helping positively or negatively. To make it more clear, suppose you want to choose in a field, every 5th yard you want to take a soil sample to see how fertile it is. So you say, okay, I started here, this is my starting point. Now 5 yards away another sample, another 5 yards away another sample. There is a gradient, fertility gradient can be their underlying gradient, which is peaking at every 5 yards that you are sampling. So what happens, your sample is biased towards high fertility, or it could be the other way also. The fertility gradient is in between very good, but the point where your sampling interval 5 yards away further, it may be very low fertility. It is possible. In a clinical scenario, if you choose, I will take every 5th day a sample, the 5th day maybe a consultant is coming, a super specialization consultant is coming and attracting a more severe cases or referred cases. So it can produce a bias. So you need to be careful about this coincidence of underlying fertility gradient or periodicity coinciding with your sampling interval. That's the limitation or a possible to cluster sampling is also a very feasible, simpler method, but it has, as I said, when you analyze the data, you need to adjust for, because it is not a simple random sample. All methods of statistical methods, analytical methods are applicable strictly if you follow a simple random sampling. Because you use cluster sampling, you need to adjust, and that adjustment is very important if it is cluster sampling. For other samplings, it may not be very serious. Okay, then another method, what is called sampling in stages. So we do at every stage certain sampling. So at every stage, units are being selected from a part of units at the immediately higher stage. So it is relatively easy to obtain a list of first stage units, but it's difficult or expensive to list all the subunits. For example, in a multi-hospital based study, the first stage hospitals, choosing hospitals is very easy. Then within the hospital, that is first stage, I can choose certain units. Then within the wards, I can choose patients. That is third stage. More importantly, many of the nationwide surveys like National Family Health Survey, they use this type design. The first stage could be states, second stage could be districts, third stage could be tehsils or taluks, fourth stage could be villages, fifth stage could be households, multi-stage or sampling in stages. It's a bit complicated design, but very practical in nationwide surveys and all. It's very practical to have. Then one last important concept of the sampling schemes is what is called probability proportional to size. We saw the very wide difference in simple random sampling versus stratified, because what made the change? Because you ignored a big unit with large size. So to incorporate this probability is linked to which is proportional to the size of the unit. So it is what is called PPS, probability proportional to size. So to talk about it further, many times the primary first stage samplings are vary in size. For example, state, if you say UP size is maybe very large compared to state of Goa or Kerala. So the first stage units vary greatly different. So naturally logical to expect that a large first stage unit should contribute more to the sample. A large unit should contribute more to the sample. So PPS, or probability proportional to size, incorporates this desirable property. A larger unit will get larger probability, a smaller unit gets smaller probability. Mind you, this is also a random selection, random sampling, but here the probabilities are not same for all. They are proportional to the size. So a large unit has a higher probability of getting selected and a small unit has a smaller probability, and this gives you very precise estimates. The precision of estimates based on PPS is very good. But these are, as I said, for multi-stage sampling, these are very applicable for national survey. So, to summarize, there are a variety of methods for sampling exists, and most often a combination of two or more employed. For example, it could be systematic sampling within strata, so stratified systematic. All statistical analytical procedures are suitable for simple random sampling. Suitable adjustments needed for other sampling schemes. That's it. So after this we will talk about how to calculate the sample size. Thank you.